High in the jagged peaks of northern Luzon, amidst the clouds and the biting cold of December, a small band of 60 men dug into the rocky earth. They weren't fighting to win a war anymore. They were fighting to buy time. Below them, thousands of American troops were closing in, a relentless tide of blue uniforms and modern rifles.
It was December 2nd, 1899. The Philippine-American War had turned into a desperate retreat for the young Philippine Republic. General Emilio Aguinaldo, the president, was fleeing north, trying to escape the grasp of the pursuing American forces. But he couldn't outrun them alone. He needed a shield.
That shield was a 24-year-old general named Gregorio del Pilar, known to his friends as Goyong and to history as the Boy General. He was handsome, dashing, and fiercely loyal. On that fateful morning, he looked at the narrow trail of Tirad Pass and made a promise. The Americans would not cross, not while he was still breathing. To understand the weight of this moment, we have to look at the map. Tirad Pass, or Pasong Tirad, is a bottleneck in the sky. It is a narrow trail climbing 4,500 feet, scarcely wide enough for one man to pass at a time. To the left, a sheer drop of hundreds of feet. To the right, towering cliffs. Del Pilar knew that in this terrain, numbers didn't matter as much as position. He had only 60 riflemen against a battalion of over 300 Americans, the elite 33rd Volunteer Infantry. But up here, perched in the clouds, 60 men could hold back an army. It was the Thermopylae of the Philippines. The young general was not naive. He wrote in his diary the night before, "The general has given me the pick of all the men that can be spared, and ordered me to defend the pass. I realize what a terrible task is given me." He knew this was likely a suicide mission, a final act of devotion to his leader and his country. As the sun rose on December 2nd, the Americans, led by Major Peyton C. March, began their ascent. They expected resistance, but they didn't expect a fortress. The trail zigzagged up the mountain, and at every turn, Del Pilar's men had constructed trenches and stone barricades, hidden by the tall Kogon grass. The first shots rang out like thunder cracks in the valley. The American vanguard tried to charge up the narrow path, but they were met with a withering hail of Mauser bullets. The Filipinos were invisible, firing from above, their smokeless powder giving away no position. Major March was frustrated. His men were pinned down. They couldn't advance a single yard without taking casualties. The narrowness of the pass meant they couldn't flank, and the height of the defenders meant their return fire was hitting nothing but rock and sky. The Boy General was holding the line. For hours, the stalemate continued. The sun climbed higher, baking the rocks. The Filipinos, though outnumbered and outgunned, cheered with every repelled assault. Del Pilar moved among them, encouraging his men, reminding them that the safety of the president depended on their aim. But war is rarely decided by frontal assaults alone. While the main force kept the Filipinos occupied, the Americans were searching for a weakness. They found it in the form of a local villager, a man named Genwario Galut. Whether by force or by bribe, Galut revealed a secret. There was a goat path, a barely visible trail that wound vertically up the other side of the mountain, bypassing the trenches entirely. It was steep, dangerous, and unguarded because it was thought to be unclimbable. A company of Texas sharpshooters began the grueling climb, pulling themselves up by roots and vines. Back at the pass, Del Pilar was unaware of the pincer closing around him. The firing from the front had lessened, and he might have thought the Americans were retreating or regrouping. He stood on a prominent rock, scanning the valley, trying to see the enemy's next move.
Suddenly, the air erupted. Shots rang out, not from below, but from behind and above. The Texas sharpshooters had reached the summit. They had the high ground now. The trap had snapped shut. The Filipino defenders were caught in a deadly crossfire.
Del Pilar saw his men falling. He shouted orders, trying to reorganize a defense, but it was too late. The position was lost. Yet he did not run. He mounted his white horse, or perhaps he just stood his ground. Accounts vary, but he remained the target, drawing fire to let others escape. Then, a single bullet found its mark. It struck the young general in the neck. Gregorio del Pilar, the boy general, the idol of the revolution, crumpled to the ground. As he fell, the resistance at Tirad Pass collapsed with him. The remaining survivors scattered into the mountains. The battle was over. The Americans rushed the position, cheering their victory. But when they found the body of the general, the cheering stopped. They realized who they had killed.
They stripped him of his souvenirs, his buttons, his spurs, his locket containing a picture of his love. It was a grim practice of war. But even in this looting, there was a strange respect. They knew they had fought a brave man.
Major March arrived at the summit. He looked at the fallen youth and ordered a burial with military honors. On a crude headstone, they carved an inscription, "An officer and a gentleman." Even his enemies recognized the courage of the boy general.
Del Pilar's sacrifice was not in vain. The delay at Tirad Pass allowed Aguinaldo to escape, prolonging the resistance for another year. But more than that, the battle became a symbol, a testament that the Filipino spirit would stand tall, even when the odds were impossible, even when the end was certain. General Gregorio del Pilar was 24 years old. He died on a mountain so that a nation could live on in memory. His last stand remains one of the most poignant chapters in Philippine history, a story of youth, bravery, and the ultimate price of freedom. The story of Tirad Pass is not just about a battle, it's about the choices we make when the walls close in. Del Pilar chose honor over safety. He chose to be the shield. In his diary, found after the battle, he wrote, "I am surrounded by fearful odds that will overcome me and my gallant men, but I am pleased with the thought that I die fighting for my beloved country." Historians debate his tactics. Some say he was too reckless, too romantic, that he exposed himself unnecessarily. But perhaps that was the point. He wasn't just a general, he was a flag, and flags must be seen to inspire. The Americans pressed on after Tirad Pass, eventually capturing Aguinaldo in 1901. The war officially ended, but the legend of Goyong only grew. He became the tragic hero of a generation. Today, a marker stands at the site of the battle. Hikers climb the same trail the Americans struggled up. They stand where Del Pilar stood, looking out over the Ilocos coast, feeling the same wind that blew on that December morning. It serves as a reminder that freedom is often bought with the blood of the young. Del Pilar had his whole life ahead of him, romances, politics, a future in a free nation. He traded it all for one afternoon on a mountain. Listen closely to Tirad Pass. The Kogon grass still waves, the rocks are still sharp. If you listen closely to the wind, you can almost hear the crack of the Mausers and the shout of the boy general. The 33rd Volunteer Infantry eventually went home. Major March became a chief of staff of the U.S. Army, but he never forgot the young Filipino general. He often spoke of him with a high regard that is rare between enemies. We must also remember the 60 men, most of their names are lost to history, farmers, laborers, sons and fathers who followed their general into the clouds, knowing they would likely never come down. Januario Galut, the guide, is often painted as the villain, but history is complex. In a war of survival, choices are rarely black and white. He remains a controversial figure, a reminder of the internal conflicts that plague every revolution. The battle lasted only a few hours. By 2 p.m., silence had returned to the pass. But those few hours echoed across the Pacific. American newspapers reported the last stand, capturing the imagination of the American public. Richard Henry Little, a war correspondent who was there, wrote, "We carved not a line, and we raised not a stone, but we left him alone with his glory," a tribute usually reserved for their own heroes.
Today, Gregorio del Pilar is a statue in plazas, a face on currency, a name of streets. But before the bronze and the marble, he was flesh and blood. He was a young man in love, afraid but resolute, standing on a rock, waiting for the end. The Battle of Tirad Pass serves as a mirror. It asks us, what do we value enough to defend?
What is our Tirad Pass? When the odds are against us, do we run or do we stand? The legacy of the boy general is not just in his death, but in his defiance. He proved that a small nation could produce giants, that courage is not measured by the size of the army, but by the depth of the conviction. As we look back at 1899, the details may fade, the uniforms rot, the rifles rust, but the spirit of Tirad Pass remains etched in the stone of the Cordilleras. It is a story that belongs to the world.
So the next time you see a statue of a young man in a uniform, remember the heat, the thirst, and the fear. Remember the choice. Remember Goyong. Thank you for watching this journey into history. If this story moved you, share it so the memory of these men never fades. This is the story of us, and it continues with you. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into the forgotten chapters of our past. Until next time, keep history alive.